Hello and welcome to What Are We Talking About with Jamie Jakes. I am him, and today I am here to talk to you guys about Taylor Swift for white males. Yep, that's right. Pat McAfee is what I'm talking about today, specifically with his dispute with ESPN. This was a big surprise to a lot of people, especially for the newer fans and followers of the Pat McAfee Show and Pat McAfee himself, when he openly criticized a major executive and called him out by name, calling him a literal rat on ESPN. It was actually on ESPN Plus. They were not on the big network, and they were also, of course, on the Pat McAfee Show on YouTube when Pat McAfee called out the ESPN executive because allegedly he is leaking bad stuff to the press to make Pat McAfee look bad. That became a big surprise to a lot of people. They're like, what's going on with this guy? Is he trying to quit his job? Is he trying to get fired from ESPN? Is he trying to troll? And it's just, I would like to take a step back and look at how Pat McAfee has done business in the past historically. Going all the way back to his football time, he always says, Pat McAfee says, it's not his saying, but he says all the time, be who you can afford to be. And that's what he was early on in his football career when he was playing for the Indianapolis Colts as a punter. He was hired to be a punter. A lot of people know that he was planning on being a kicker in the NFL, but the Colts hired him to be a punter, and that's what he was learning how to do. And because of that, he knew he couldn't afford to mess up too bad, so he did stay off Twitter. He did have one incident allegedly in a river on a late night where he was arrested, but other than that, he laid pretty low early on in his career. Later on in his career, he became an excellent punter, being named the punter of the decade by Pro Football Focus for what it's worth. And because of that, he started tweeting and he started building his own following, eventually doing shows in the off season, which of course came with its fair share of criticism. But Pat McAfee thought he could afford to do that because of what he has put on the field and how he is valued. And because of that value, he now has leverage in the NFL. He eventually openly had a dispute with the higher-ups in the Colts organization, which was one of the catalysts that caused him to retire early and start the Pat McAfee Show, going to work on the internet. When he started off early on, he actually, a lot of people don't realize that he was actually on terrestrial radio early on in his career, where he had the show entirely censored. Later on that short-lived run on the radio, however, you sort of sense that he did start to get a little bit fed up, maybe with some of the things that he was being told from the higher-ups there, or maybe it was just the format. He constantly started swearing and talked through hard cuts in the radio station. So they moved on from there, and they went to Mad Dog Russo. Mad Dog Russo's channel on Sirius XM, where he was uncensored, but Mad Dog Russo didn't like the way he was running his operation, openly criticized him on his own network. Pat McAfee, of course, felt disrespected on that, but it was much more subtle, the amount of heat he was given back at Mad Dog. He was keeping it a little bit quieter than what we're seeing right now. I think that's because he determined that he didn't have quite the leverage, quite the pull that he does now as basically, one of the best personalities, if not the hottest personality on the ESPN network. So he kept it a little bit subtle there. After they parted ways with SiriusXM, it was a pretty quiet day. They just the contract ended, and Pat McAfee wasn't on air anymore. He didn't say much of it until news stories started to come out saying that SiriusXM dropped Pat McAfee, which may or may not have been true. Wasn't a good partnership to begin with, in my opinion. Either way, Pat was pretty quiet about it, even though he might have felt disrespected. He kept it pretty low at that time, which was only, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, as I am recording this video right now. And then Pat McAfee started to build a lot of credibility, getting on College Game Day, and started growing a massive, massive following on his YouTube channel. And that's when he determined that he could afford to be a little bit extra. And I think we're seeing the culmination of that right now. Back then, it was originally a dispute with FanDuel, where a FanDuel executive, their main sponsor on the channel, I think it was reported that he was getting paid over $40 million a year just for the FanDuel exclusive sports book agreement that he had with the Pat McAfee Show with FanDuel. A executive went on an interview and said basically called Pat Show, a small regional show, Indiana-based show that was more of a test pilot to maybe add some more other bigger productions onto the FanDuel roster. Pat didn't like that too much, and I think Pat was a big turning point in his career where he felt comfortable enough to really speak his mind on the air. Even though he says his show is a mental vacation every once in a while, he does go in hard on certain people, and they did. They just about tried to cut ties with FanDuel. They actually, mid-episode, pulled the FanDuel icon off of the stream and was verbally, clearly upset with the way he was being treated by FanDuel back then. Now, you look forward a little bit later, you see the Aaron Rodgers and the Brett Favre situation, primarily with the Brett Favre situation. He was, talking trash about Brett Favre, reporting the news the way it was, because if you guys don't know, that was pretty serious stuff that Brett was being accused of at the time. And that ended up getting him sued by Brett Favre. I'm sure Pat McAfee had tons of lawyers that told him, hey, just lay low, don't say anything about it. That's not how Pat operates anymore in his business world and his legal world now, where he openly said that the lawsuit was total bullshit, kind of doubled down on Brett Favre, and basically just explained like, hey, we're telling the news and we're going to tell it with a comedic spin, which is why you see that disclaimer on the ESPN show now. Of course, he wins that dispute. So, aggressive, mean Pat McAfee, if you count back his days in the NFL, is now 3-0 in this tactic, this like hard-nosed, Pittsburgh way of doing business. And now we're seeing it with the ESPN executive. Allegedly, it's not alleged, somebody is reporting, doing anonymous reports to different news stations about basically trying to trash Pat McAfee and his character and the logistics of what he is doing for ESPN, the numbers he is putting out there for ESPN. So I think Pat had enough. I think he had a pretty good idea of who was doing it, because he is an old head in ESPN, and he went ahead and said what he said on ESPN, surprised a lot of people. And I think he's looking all right, because as of right now, we just watched him call the national championship game, which I'm sure that's going to do awesome ratings, because whenever he's on the sideline talking into a microphone, people tend to tune in. I do not think Pat's going to get any lighter. Tell me what you think. Do you think he's just utilizing his leverage in a better way, or do you think he's getting a little bit too big for his britches and being too big of a diva? Or do you think this is just like a shitty business tactic? Do you think it's not working? Do you think things could be handled a little bit differently for Pat McAfee, the way he does business? Please leave a like, subscribe. We are, as I'm recording this video, about halfway to 500 subscribers. That's a big milestone for anybody on YouTube. So if you could please support and tell a friend, that'll be one step closer to start paying the guys that help me out with the show, because I got a lot of support cast around me. So anyway, we can get closer to that. That would be awesome. Thank you guys, and good night.